Everybody tonight. Just find yourself a good spot because we're in for a treat tonight. Okay, so before I even begin anything, I've got Ralph over here is going to pray a prayer of invocation, invite the presence of God into our room. All right, thank you very much, Ralph. I met Ralph at the Tesla Tech Convention in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where we study strange and unusual technology, and I was so delighted that he's here tonight at our gathering. So this particular gathering tonight's put together by the House of Prayer. We're a little organization here, assembly at Fayetteville, Arkansas. That's where this is being held, the area near Fayetteville, Arkansas. And it's a religious organization, as it's called. And we put this together here and invited David Straight because we have heard that David Straight has some fantastic information to bless people in the areas of life as they interact with so-called government and potentially government and non-government, as you will hear tonight when he gives his presentation. And we're going to examine the things that he has to share with us and the things that we can apply to our lives to alter our life and take the boot off our neck and to find a freedom from oppression. That's what we're looking for in this hour. We've understood that he offers some information for people that are under the heavy hand of Child Protective Services and child trafficking information. At this particular time, I'm understanding that David is serving on 2 executive task forces right now, presidential task forces, one having to do with child trafficking, the other having to do with corruption in government, and having been a Navy SEAL, an intelligence officer, and a deputy sheriff. Yeah, by the way, silence your phones. That's a good idea. It's a good warning. Good warning there. Having served as a deputy sheriff and a part owner in a, what was it, David? Help me out here. Was it a mortgage company or a title company, you said? Started and ran 13 businesses. We're going to go ahead and give him the ear because he's got the experience to bring the message today. I'm going to tell you the outline of today. There's a bathroom up here off into the breezeway. There's also two bathrooms downstairs. We're going to take a break in about an hour and a half for those of you that may need a potty break. And we're going to go, literally our message said 6 to 9. I'm happy to have David present what he needs to present and answer any questions. We've got coffee and refreshments afterwards downstairs, so you can stay for the presentation. Right now, we're going to just dive right into let David take it away with our presentation. Could you please give a warm welcome to David Straight? Thank you.
That's enough. I don't like too much fanfare. I'm usually a really quiet, humble person, and I've spoken to a lot of groups, so I'm not scared to speak in front of you. But you know, I don't need any kind of recognition for what I do. I do this for one reason only, is because I love people, and I believe we have been under a system of corruption for far, far too long. And it's because of the lack of communication. I believe the people that founded this country were basically good, honest, and moral people who wanted a better life, and that's why they went through some extreme life struggles to get here and to do the things they needed to do. Do I believe they were all good and perfect? No. I can prove they weren't. But they had a good, basic moral character. Do I need to move my mic or something?
Still a little bit of feedback he has on his mic.
Yeah, I hear that bad. So anyway, that's going to be hard because I'm a walker and a talker. Anyway, there's certain things that I want to get across to you. One, I want you guys to get simple. I want you to get basic. And I say that coming from a position of somebody who used to talk really fast, walk really fast, do everything really quick. I could out debate just about everybody on a variety of subjects. I'm very well educated. I've got 5 degrees. Why? I don't know. Just because I've been studying my whole life. I study 3, 4, 5 hours a day, sometimes till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Every opportunity I can get, I study. Now the problem with that is, I spent 20 years in this business making it complicated. And I'm trying to drum this into Daniel's head a little bit. 20 years making it complicated. There's too many things going on out there, too many things happening, and we can file writs of mandamus and habeas corpuses, and we can do all kinds of variety of things, administrative processes and stuff, and we can make this business incredibly complicated. Or we can solve it in 5 minutes, making it simple. Okay? That's the point I want to get across. I want to make it simple for you. But I'm going to talk about perceived power and authority. And I'm going to show you a couple of things, even a couple of things I didn't tell the guys last night, to kind of show you how we got to where we are today and how things have came down through history and the reason why we're so oppressed. I've traveled the entire world, just about every nation, every continent for sure, just about every state, and everywhere I go, I realize one important thing. We're less free in America than any other country I visit, pretty much. We are less free here than just about anywhere in the world. I had 48 years of misconception, of propaganda about China. China's a country with a huge population. Lots of cities of 10, 14, 20 million people in a city. And they got almost no crime. Very few police officers. Most of them, none of them that I saw had a gun on them. They're all standing on the street corners helping little old ladies across the street with their bags and helping tourists on directions. You never see a cop on the major freeways. You'll see a cardboard or plywood cutout of a cop car saying, please slow down to protect your fellow neighbors. It'll say that. I went to lunch, 2-hour lunches with groups of engineers, very smart, intelligent people who are living in $1 million apartments, who are making $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 a year American equivalent, who are driving $70,000 cars because China puts a $10,000 tax on every vehicle. And they've got $2,000 laptops sitting on the seat. The weather's warm, and their windows are rolled down, and the sidewalk's right in front of their car, and hundreds of people are walking back and forth. And we all get out of the car, and I know their laptops are sitting there, and they start walking into the restaurant, and I go, hey, wait a minute, aren't you going to roll up the windows and lock the cars? And they look at me and they go, why? No Chinamen steal anything. They won't reach in that car. And I said, they won't? They won't steal anything? What do you mean? He said, because 25 Chinamen walking down the sidewalk would tackle them, beat them to death, and hold them for the police. We don't worry about that. And we go in the restaurant, we're in there for 2 hours, we come back, and there's laptops. Car windows are all the way down, all the way, not just this far. And nobody steals them. And during that 2 hours, I'll bet you 100,000 people walk down that sidewalk. I mean, they're 14 wide, going every which way. Lots of people. It's like New York at rush hour, ×2. And nobody steals anything. They think it's a sin for their older people to die in the hospital. They have to die at home in their own bed, taken care of by their family. They take care of their kids, they take care of their elderly. What the heck's wrong with us here? That's what I'd like to know. I didn't know China was that way. I thought they were this communist country that our government sells us into. And I was an intelligence officer. I was in the Navy. I thought that's the way it was. Then I go to China, not once, 2, 3, 4 times in a period of 3 or 4 years. And I go, wow, what a beautiful country. Now they do have some smog, that was a problem, but they're cleaning that up right now. And actually right now they're going through a little bit of a depression since Trump took office. But that's going to change. They'll pull themselves out of it because they're hard-working, good, moral, honest people. And the government is easy to spot. They all drive black Audi cars. Audi A7s and A8s and black Audi A6s. Depending on the rank in government, they get a lower number, see? And a higher number, the higher the rank. And they all drive these black Audis. And so the people, they just say, oh, yeah, they're a government guy. He get paid well, he leave us alone. They don't care. It's like they don't even exist. And they don't fool with them unless they're doing something dramatic. They don't fool with them. The people in China are freer than we are. In 1992, Russia signed the ICCPR, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And they rewrote their entire nation's constitutions. And they started holding elections for the first time, and Putin was put in place. And his people love him, and they flourish under him. And he does well. And he's sharp, he's decisive, he doesn't let them get away with corruption. And so they keep reelecting him. They don't have terms like we have here. They'll just reelect somebody as many times as they think he's doing good until he's old and senile, and then they throw him out and put somebody else new. And Russia, since 1993, has been a freer country than we are. We get fed a whole line of crap, propaganda from our own government. I'll tell you what, I go to Russia and they're some of the smartest, nicest, sweetest, best people ever. And they take care of their neighbors, and they take care of their young, and they take care of their elderly. The misconceptions we have in America are unbelievable. We live under such a slave system, and other than the other 13 English commonwealths that are along with us, every other country is pretty free. You can do just about anything you want. Here, you want to change a light bulb, you got to get an electrical permit just about. You got to tell your county what you're doing to build a shed, right? I mean, to fix your own sewer system, you got to get a permit. You got to get a license for something. Every time you bow to perceived authority, you're giving up a right in exchange for a privilege. What does the word privilege mean? We all were taught, what? That's something good. No, it's not. It's not something good. To have a privilege is terrible. It's a sin. It's to take upon sin is what a privilege is. We were all taught wrong on purpose. Let me give you a couple of things in history that'll tell you this. In 1951, our federal government created this wonderful older school teacher lady named Jane Spalding. And they paraded her around the country to all 50 states to sell the state governments on the auspice of standardized education and government funding to the schools and government funding to the states. My throat gets really dry because I got poisoned back in March, okay? So anyway, I apologize for that, but I'm going to be doing that a lot. So anyway, they paraded around for 2 years, and if you could close your eyes and picture the most perfect school teacher in your mind, that was Jane Spalding. She literally was next to perfect. And they said she was going to be the head of the Department of Education. That's what she was sold on. So April 11th, 1953, the 50th state finally signed off, and they made Jane Spalding the head of the Department of Education. 49 days later, the President of the United States fired Jane Spalding and appointed Nelson Aldrich Rockefeller to run the Department of Education. And during his acceptance speech in front of the media, which was a group about this size, so if you were all media and I was Nelson Aldrich Rockefeller, this is about the way the group was. And he stood up there at the podium and he said, "I consider this the greatest position in government." And the reporters' hands all shot up and the flash bulbs went off. And the first reporter asked, "Why do you consider this the greatest position in government? Greater than the President of the United States and the Vice President?" And he said, "Absolutely. This is the greatest position in government." And they said, "Why?" "Because you give me 1 decade, 1 generation, and I'll change the minds and therefore the direction of the world through the Department of Education." And it took him 8 years. It didn't even take him 10. By the end of the 8th year, every school in the United States had, I'm going to call them propaganda textbooks. I can get any history book and I can tell you that the whole thing is full of lies. Stomp on it a little bit and it's clear full of lies. The bull crap will just flow out of it. And that's what happens, see? That's a problem to me because I raised 10 kids, 8 of my own, 2 adopted. Okay? And my kids all grew up to be very sharp, independent, well-educated kids who are taking care of their own family, and I got 15 grandkids. And I didn't raise them very much in the public school system. The majority of their first 13 years, they were taught at home. Okay? So, a couple other things Nelson Rockefeller said during that speech. They said, "How much money did you make last year, Nelson?" And he says, "I made $140 million. I think the head of the Department of Education in 1953 was paid about $30,000, somewhere right in that neighborhood." Okay? Why would you take a $30,000 a year position when you made $140 million last year? Anybody answer that one? If you didn't think you could change the world by doing it? It's the only reason, right? It wasn't for the money, right? They asked him, "How much did you pay in taxes?" And he pulls an Indian head penny out and he tosses it in the audience and he says, "Not 1 red cent." That was a pretty racist comment. Today he'd be crucified for that one. But anyway, Nelson Aldrich Rockefeller ran the Department of Education for 8 years. And our school systems haven't been the same since. Little tiny kids, every year they get up on stage 77 years ago. They talk about good old honest Abe, right? Man who never told a lie, whose face is out Mount Rushmore. See, I spent 2 years in the National Archives in Washington, D.C. I figured out the only way to learn history is to read letters and journals of people who lived during the time. Get their opinion. Put those opinions together, and that's how you learn real history, because you sure aren't going to learn it in a textbook. Textbook is all lies, every darn word of it. So the first thing you do is throw away all those textbooks. Those are the books that should be burnt, all right? So let's talk about good old honest Abe, right? He was a bar association attorney, lived in the state of Illinois. Go to the state of Illinois' website today. Go to the Office of the Attorney General. Click on the History tab, and it says the Office of the Attorney General of the state of Illinois was put into place to protect and uphold the interests of the Crown. the Crown Ink. Okay? Good old England and its monarchs. That's what the Crown Ink was the very first corporation in the world. Okay? So let's talk about Abe a little bit. He was a follower of Karl Marx. Karl Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto in 1848. Okay? He passed a whole bunch of communistic laws that are still today screwing up Illinois. Okay? Terrible state to live in. And they're still screwing up Illinois. I'm going to be there on the 19th of this month, speaking in Chicago. And he messed it up. He was the governor of Illinois, and he ran for president 5 times and he failed. Why did he fail 5 times? Because the people didn't like the communist Abe Lincoln. Not the story we read in our textbooks, is it? Not the story at all that we put up on Mount Rushmore. In fact, he wrote a letter that said, if it was up to me, I never would have freed the slaves. Those are words right out of Abe's mouth. He never would have freed the slaves. Civil War wasn't even about slavery. It was about the Morrill Act. Senator Morrill wrote an unfair tax bill that taxed the farmers of the South a higher percentage rate than the manufacturers and bankers of the North. So 11 delegates from 7 southern states walked out of Congress, leaving Congress sin die. What does that mean? That's right. That means it died that day. Congress died that day. Another thing, how did he finally become president on his 6th time? His opponent had $5,000 to run his campaign with. Abe Lincoln, because of the bankers of Boston and Chicago, Philadelphia, and New York, had $7 million in his campaign. You know how much money $7 million? $5,000 was a lot of money when somebody made 20 bucks a month. And Abe Lincoln had $7 million. So all they did is plastered his face everywhere. They put it on billboards, on the sides of trains. Heck, he paraded on, campaigned on a train. Train would come into town, there'd be a standing at the back, surrounded by red, white, and blue, waving to everybody, shaking hands, kissing babies, right? And he became president of the United States, except for one thing. He couldn't be president of the United States. Why couldn't he be? Because the first Constitution had 13 amendments. The 13th Amendment was called the Tona Amendment, Title and Nobility Act, and no bar attorney could become president. So what did he do? First day on in the job, he signed an executive order bankrupting the United States of America. Next executive order created a corporation out of Delaware under the United States. He made himself a CEO. Not only that, he put the Grand Army of the Republic in charge by another executive order. And then he made himself commander-in-chief of the Army. That's why every president is sworn in as commander-in-chief and president of the corporation since then. Every president since then. No president before Abe Lincoln ever signed an executive order. Why didn't they? Because they weren't an executive. You can't be an executive unless you're an executive of a company. We had a de jure government up until that point. In 1861, it became de facto. A lot of people think it was 1871 when the District of Columbia Corporation was set up. But no, it started in 1861 with Abe Lincoln. Starting his first month in presidency, in 30 days, he wrote 100 executive orders. No president prior to that had ever written one. 100 executive orders. You know what executive order number 100 is? Anybody? That's right. It was the Lieber Code. It put the nation under martial rule. Now, that's different than martial law. Martial rule. put the military in charge of the country. And until the Posse Comitatus Act, except for that act, military is in charge of the country. But because of that act, they're not allowed to get involved in civil matters. Then how come I've had a provost marshal general in court twice? How did I get him involved in civil matters? Because I said, I don't care if you know the defendant's name. I don't care if you know what he's charged with. I don't care if you know his attorney or any of his actions at all. I don't want you involved in a civil matter. I said, I want you there because you're in charge of this judge. He's under your purview, and he's committing capital felony treason. Show up and watch. Okay? Show up and watch. Anybody know who Tim Holmseth is? You guys are sitting way too far back there. You guys in the back row, come forward. All right? Because I'm going to write stuff and you're not going to be able to see it. I couldn't see it from halfway. So anyway. Anybody know who Tim Holmseth is? Nobody? Oh, that alone is shocking to me. Tim has been a reporter an award-winning reporter for the last 10 or 12 plus years. I know it's been at least 12 years, okay? And he's being persecuted right now in the state of Minnesota by an attorney firm in the state of Florida. And he's being persecuted in Minnesota for releasing information that was already public. Don't we have freedom of speech and freedom of the press? And all he's doing is releasing information that's already on the public record, and he's taking it and he's putting it on the internet and he's telling everybody about it. And they're persecuting him. You know what they did? They got a gag order, a protection order against a lady who is committing child and sex trafficking in Florida, and she's an attorney for a big attorney firm in guess which county? Broward County, Florida, which is one of the most corrupt in the nation. And she is taking him to court every month. She's suing him for something to keep him tied up, spending his resources, spending his time, so he can't do any reporting because he called her out on something that was already on a court record down there. So it's not like he went to Florida and did investigative journalism and found out something that nobody else had. It's not proprietary information. It's public record. And he's just taking what's already on the record and putting it out there, right? It's not illegal in any way, shape, or form. So she sued him in the state of Florida, and his life was threatened if he showed up in court. He'd never set foot in the state of Florida in his life. He's never been there. And his life was threatened, so he didn't go. And so they've got a protection order against him. He says, no problem, I'm not going to go down there and bother you. He didn't think anything of it. So she's enforcing the Florida protection order in Minnesota, where he lives. Every time he puts something out on the internet. And they keep hauling him into jail. And I didn't learn about Tim until his second trial was coming up, after his first one. And the first one, he went there and he was railroaded and found guilty and put in jail for 45 days. And I went up there and I got him out of jail on the 41st day, whoop-de-doo. I saved him 4 days of his life, right? But then we walked out the door on the 41st day, and the sheriff walked over and arrested him, hauled him back in the door. We didn't get 25 feet, and they arrested him. So I flew back home and started helping Tim with a little bit of paperwork over the phone. And his next trial date came up about 30 days later. And I leave Bend, Oregon, and I go, you know what? Kirk Pendergrass. Anybody know Kirk Pendergrass? You guys. All right, start watching Kirk's Law Corner. Kirk has an IQ of about 155. He's sharp as a tack. Everything he reads, he remembers. And the page number. Okay? He's got one of those photographic memories. And he can read the law and know the law better than most attorneys. So I'm leaving Bend in a car, about ready to drive to Minnesota. And I call up Kirk and I say, hey, you got a bag packed? I said, I'll be there in 4.5 hours. Kirk says, 4.5 hours? That's not enough time. I'm not going anywhere. So I wait 2 hours. When I get to Burns, Oregon, I call Kirk up. I said, hey, Kirk, 2.5 hours away. I'll be there at your house to pick you up. I told him the situation. He says, okay, I'll go. Stopped at his house, picked him up. We shot up to Minnesota, right out of Great Falls, North Dakota, just across the border, a little town called Crookston. In fact, all 3 counties there have a population of about 10,000 people. It's almost to Canada. It's way up there, all right? And I pick Kirk up, and we show up with Tim in court, and Kirk and I stand in court under E-Clause LLC and presidential executive orders, and we speak an hour and 20 minutes on behalf of Tim. And in that court, we called the judge out 3 times on the record for capital felony treason. And it went unrebutted. He knew he committed it. So he dismissed the case and recused himself. 30 days later, they're hauling him back into court again. We've done this 5 times now, 5 judges. The last time, we had 150 people show up from all over the world. Court from England flew in to his court. And Tim didn't show. And he didn't show because literally on public television, they threatened to kill him if he showed up. So he didn't show. So we had a lawful strategic plan in place in case that happened. And Kirk went in the courtroom and took care of some business. The judge still issued a warrant because he didn't show. But when you read the warrant, you'll giggle. It's only for a misdemeanor, and it's only good in that county in Minnesota. So as long as he stays out of that county, they're not going to pick him up, right? So we've got him stationed in a safe house, and he's fine. But we're just going to fight it on a higher level because they just, one judge after another in this courtroom, and they just keep committing capital felony treason, okay? And they're doing that in every courthouse in the United States. Every single courthouse in the United States. Every day, they're committing capital felony treason on you, on all of us. Every one of our neighbors that has to walk into that courtroom. And the problem is they've been getting away with it for too long, far too long. That's why we're really here today. See, we were at war. There are 2 wars going on in the world right now, and it ain't Afghanistan and Iraq. Okay, it's not with another nation. One war is going on inside that group, and the other war is going on between the bankers have an army. They are called attorneys. The Bar Association works for the bankers under the Crown Inc. versus we the people. This is the war we're fighting. Every one of us are fighting this war today. And it's one of the most costly and bloodiest wars in the history of mankind. You couldn't do this much damage with A-1 tanks and howitzers as they're doing to us today. They're stealing our children, they're stealing our property, and they're stealing our lives. Many, many millions of people in our prison systems. And every organization like Harvard University, Cornell, Yale, have all done studies on our prison systems. These are them doing studies. And they've determined that between 41 and 69% of the prison population does not belong there, has committed no crime. 41 to 69%, depending on which of those studies you read. That's half. Let's just call it 50% break in the middle. Half of our prison population doesn't belong there. Right down the road here at this little gas station, when you walk in there to buy a body armor to the counter, and the counter is about this tall, and you put it up there, right next to it is a newspaper that they sell for $2, which is just a picture after picture after picture of the criminals in this area who are being sought after by the law. Oh my gosh, I started reading some of those. I even grabbed it. She goes, that's $2. I said, I don't want to buy it. I just want to look at it. And I walked over and I started thumbing through there, and I'm looking at what these people are being accused of. At least 50% of them didn't commit a crime. And here's their pictures on there, public slander. They're being slandered. Their reputations are being destroyed. A lot of them look like you guys, right? Because it could be one of us, right? Some sovereign citizen somewhere. We'll joke about that for a while, but there's no such thing as a sovereign citizen. We've had 44 out of 45 presidents stand in front of the cameras and say the people are sovereign. 44 out of 45 have said that in front of the camera. I know, I've read every presidential speech. Every one of them. Go back to Washington's. And the people are sovereign. I'm sovereign. That's why I'm using a purple pen. Right? I've got a purple pen in my pocket. All right? Dead is black, blue is contract, red is living, purple is royalty. Okay? Know your ink colors. They're important. They're important on your documents. Another thing I want to mention briefly is inside that circle, you could stick the name of any organization or agency in our government, our perceived government. And right down the middle of that, you could build the Great Wall of China. And on one side, you're going to have order followers. And on the other side, you're going to have the best of the best of the brightest there are in their given field. People that have saved the world, saved you, every one of you, over and over and over again. I don't care if this is a CIA. Don't say anything bad about them, because you're sitting here because of them. Otherwise, you'd be dead and buried. There are people in every one of those agencies who have saved this country single-handedly by themselves. And I can tell you story after story after story. I've told some of you already, some of them. Don't talk bad about an agency. It has nothing to do with agency. It has to do with you. Government operates through the consent of the governed. If I was going to rattle off about key points in about 20 Supreme Court cases, it goes something like this. Since governments have chosen to incorporate themselves, they must follow the same rules as any other corporation. That rules, statutes, ordinances, even executive orders are not law. They are not law. They are corporate bylaws. They are for employees of the corporation to follow. Who are the employees of their corporation? You. Every one of you was made an employee. Very first day you were born, a paper was filed to the Department of Human Resources, the HR department of the corporation. Just like when you go to work as an employee for any other company, you went to the HR department right after you were hired, before you could even start work. And you filled out all your forms and you did all your stuff with HR and you signed up for your health plan that probably didn't take effect for 90 days or whatever, right? All those things that you do. And the same thing happened to you the day you were born. I'm an ambassador for Voice of Youth, and over 50 sovereign nations have me do their work. And it keeps me really, really busy. Besides this, and besides getting over 270 children returned to their parents in the last 2 years alone. Okay. I don't need fanfare. But what I'm trying to say is this. Threw me off a little bit. Governments operate through the consent of the governed to deprive us of our rights under the color of law. Title 18, Section 241 and 242. It's a conspiracy. It says that. The United States Code, get familiar with it. Because it was put there for one reason only. It's so we, the people, can hold these people plus these people, government, accountable. That's it. It's the only reason it was put there. It wasn't for them to hold us accountable, but they tried to by making you an employee. How do they make you an employee? Why did I write it like that? Because city means municipal. Zen is society. It's a municipal society. You claim to be a citizen, you're claiming to be an employee of government. Why would you want to be that? Why would you want to be a citizen of anything? That's right. It's not in our textbooks, is it? Kindergarten through 12th grade, we didn't learn very much, I can tell you that. How many law classes did you have? Wait a minute, none. When you were 15, you got a permit, didn't you? From that moment on, you've been dealing with the law, and you didn't have a single law class? Just don't understand our education system. So let's talk about this one. You remember 1999, Bill Clinton sitting in front of Congress being interrogated and charged verbally with some crimes? I should say alleged crimes, because you know he never did that, right? This is Arkansas. I gotta be careful what I say in Arkansas regarding my friends, the Clintons. Anyway, the last day of testimony, he stood there all day and he played with a dollar bill. And he just played with it. He rolled it up, he did all kinds of things with it. He folded it and he creased it and he turned it over, folded it back, and till he got tired of listening. And then he held it up, just like that. And you could watch about 25 heads in the room just nod. Congressional hearings are over, and he served out the rest of his presidency to 2001. He never had to say a word. He sat there all day, didn't answer one question, because he had the right to remain silent. Pled the fifth. But he held that up. Why? What's it mean? Let's talk about what it means. This world, and I wanted to start with telling you there's two of everything. There's two of you. There's your all caps name, and then there's your upper and lowercase first and middle name with your last name tacked on. Okay? But there's two of you. Citizen, person, and resident. If you're any of those three or all of those three, you need CPR. Because you're dead. You're dead. All right, the dollar bill. The all-seeing eye is the Pindar. Pindar. This is the Council of 13. There's 13 bricks in that pyramid. The bottom half of the pyramid has 300 bricks. That's the Council of 300. If you draw an imaginary line at that first layer of bricks, and you draw vertical lines down, you can write the name of every organization on earth on any of those lines. You could write the Masons, the Illuminati, the government of Fayetteville, and the government of whatever county this is in, and whatever state we're in, and you could write every government, every organization, every church that's a 501c3, any major churches, Catholic Church, Mormon Church, Baptist Church, Protestant Church, doesn't matter. You can write every organization on it. Even Christ was against organized religions. We need to meet as neighbors. We can hold church wherein two or more gathered together, there am I also. I am a Christian. I'm a firm believer in the Bible. I'm a firm believer that there will attain salvation someday if we live righteously, and that we can repent for our sins. But I'm telling you right now, even Christ knew man would corrupt any organization. As people increase in their level of power, they get greedy, envious, prideful. Just name any of the 7 deadly sins, right? And then some. And that's what happens to them. And the minute they do that, they go up into this pyramid that is controlled. And that's what's wrong with every organization on earth. Now, I'm not saying every single one of them are, but I'm saying there's a heck of a good chance. See, everything in life is about good versus evil. 1/3 of the hosts of heaven were what? Okay? Good versus evil. Citizen, person, and resident. It's 3 things that we never want to be. In fact, in the book of Job, and 5 other authors in the Bible have distinguished clearly between a man and a person. Job 32:21. What's it say? It says, be the man and not the person. 22, it says, don't put the flattering titles upon a man of a person. We never want to be persons. We're not persons. We're people. Why did our founding fathers say we the people? We the people created government. The people laid down the law. And right now they're sure stepping outside of their scope and authority that we the people laid down. So why? Why are we the people? Every one of our documents that we file in court should say, I am a man, a living soul, a son of God. I am one of we the people who created government. There's a maximum law that says that in which one creates, one controls. You want to control our perceived authority? Then you better be a we the people. which means not a citizen, a person, or resident. So you need to repudiate your citizenship. In the United States Code, in Title 8, Section 1101, it says, this is the definitions of statuses in the United States. Everything in the law is about status, standing, and jurisdiction. Status, standing, and jurisdiction. You don't even know who you are. None of us. In kindergarten through 12th grade, which I'm assuming most people have, were you ever taught that there's a whole bunch of different statuses? Lots of statuses. Why do you think Hillary Clinton's never been arrested? Because we physically have to have proof and evidence of her physically harming another person. Why? Because she knows her darn status. She's an American state national. She's an Arkansan. Not anymore, right? I think she moved the heck out of here. You guys kick her out? I hope so. All right? That's why she's never been arrested. She has the dirty work done. She doesn't do it herself. Right? How do you prove that she's harmed another person? She doesn't do it herself. Takes some pretty good evidence. And everybody complains, how come we haven't arrested Hillary yet? Nobody'd like to see that more than I would. Nobody. But we haven't. I don't like talking politics. But, huh? Thank you. Standing. All persons are equal in the law, rich or poor, black or white, doesn't matter. It's a little quote the Bar Association likes to throw out there occasionally. Another one they throw out there that they don't like to admit to, but they print it in their ABA journal every once in a while, is no fact or truth shall be tried in court. It's a nice little motto, right? No fact or truth shall be tried in court. Because they base everything off presumption, assumption, and hearsay. Jurisdiction. Probably one of the most misused words in the law by our attorneys. By our attorneys. The army of the bankers. No, an attorney, he was standing just past the bar exam. He's standing in Seattle at the Space Needle. And he's up on top at the restaurant. They just had a big meal celebration. And he's standing there and he's looking out the window. And one of the older attorneys came up to him and says, "You see all that out there? You see all those powerful corporations like Microsoft and all that? See all those? Guess who controls those? Not the CEOs. Every one of those guys run to their corporate attorney. The attorneys control those corporations, not the CEOs of the company, not their board of directors. They don't do anything until they run it past the legal department. Not a stinking thing." And he realized that day he shouldn't have ever became an attorney because he didn't want anything to do with that. You see, he's taken away somebody else's control and authority. Can you all hear me? I talk quiet. Okay. Every organization on earth. What does the word attorney mean? Look it up in a legal dictionary. It says an actor to a turn. That's the definition of an attorney. An actor to a turn. What is the legal definition of an actor? It's someone who gets up on stage and lies convincingly enough to make you believe in the character and the plot. Yeah, Yeah, somebody who lies convincingly enough. What does to a turn mean? It means to steal from one and turn over to another. So by the very definitions of their professions, they're liars and thieves. Let's bankrupt them all and make a pact, never hire an attorney for anything. You don't need it. Because it takes 3 signatures to steal your life. It takes the judges, the prosecutors, and your attorney or you. Your attorney or you. That means if you're in jail, it's because you signed a plea deal or your attorney signed your bond for you that put you in jail. So if you hired an attorney thinking he's going to protect you and get you out of jail, See, I've gone to federal courts where someone's actually been tried by a jury and found guilty of felonies, and I meet them right after their trial and before their sentencing, and we walk in and we nullify their trial and their sentencing. How do we do that? We fire their attorney. If you have an attorney, you are a ward of the state, a ward of the court, you're incompetent and unable to speak for yourself. How many of you want to be that? If you hire an attorney, you're incompetent. You're infirmed. You're a minor or a corporation. You are not a man or a woman. They cannot represent a man or a woman. Did you know that? It's against the law. It's against the law for any attorney to represent a man or a woman. They can only represent your entity, your person. You're incompetent, you're infirmed. It says that right in their laws. Who can an attorney represent? A minor, a corporation, a person, somebody incompetent, somebody infirmed. That's it. So you fire your attorney. You don't sign anything. And you make sure you are competent. Could be right, could be wrong. Competent. I've never been a good speller. Actually, when I sit down and think about it on the computer, I'm pretty good. But when I'm up here, I'm trying to think ahead of myself. So I get it wrong. If you are competent and you don't sign anything and you don't have an attorney, you can't go to jail. Then you go home. Now they can throw you in jail for contempt. In fact, they can throw you in jail for contempt 3 times. They can throw you in jail for contempt to try and force you to have an attorney. They can throw you in jail for contempt to try and force you into a plea deal. And they can throw you in jail for contempt to get a incompetency hearing. Now the problem with incompetency, it's a 2-edged sword for the court. So believe me, they want you competent, except in the state of New York. They want you competent. In the state of New York, they want you incompetent because they make a lot of money off mental health facilities without even being sentenced, without a trial, without due process of law. They can put you in a mental health facility for a year. I just tell people to tell them, wait a minute, I went to a government-funded and controlled school system for 13 years, and I got a certificate of competency called a diploma. What do you mean I'm incompetent? I filed all these documents, sui juris on my behalf in this court. What do you mean I'm incompetent? I got this degree and that degree, and I've been a successful businessman. What do you mean I'm incompetent? And the judge goes, crap. I can't find him incompetent. So that's one of the easiest things to get around, is to make sure you're competent. So be competent, don't have an attorney, and don't sign anything. Don't go to jail. It's that simple. Even after you've been tried by a jury and found guilty, you'll stay out of jail. Saved a lady 20 years of her life for 4 felony counts of fraud. Gina Nilsson, I saved her 5 years of her life. Stephen in Utah, I forget his last name, he was going to go for life, and he didn't do anything. They manufactured his case, and he never spent a day in jail. Gina spent almost 90 days in jail, 87 days, because in Utah, they can hold you in jail up to 30 days for contempt. Most states, it's like 72 hours. But in Utah, it can be up to 30 days at a time. So they hauled her to jail for 29 days to try and force her to have an attorney, to break her down, mentally and physically break her down so that she'd accept an attorney. And on the 29th day, they hauled her in for a hearing. And she said, no, I'm not going to have an attorney. They put her back in jail for contempt for 29 days to try and force her into a plea deal. And every time they walked in with a piece of paper to sign, she said, no, I'm not signing nothing. They threw her back. She went in for a hearing. They said, we're going to order a competency hearing. We're going to send a psychologist over to the jail. He walks through the door, and she goes, you realize I have a degree in psychology, right? She goes, you realize I have 2 businesses that I run and operate. You do realize that I filed over 700 pages of documents in this court, right? He goes, you're competent. They hauled her back in for the hearing. It was over in 5 minutes, and she walked out and hugged her mother. I got a picture of it on my phone. She was already tried by a jury and found guilty. Okay. 3 sentencing hearings. 3. And she was thrown in jail for contempt at every sentencing hearing. Because they can do that to try and force you, to break you down mentally and physically. Here's a line I want you all to know. First of all, anytime you're dealing with authority, try to shut up. Don't say anything. That's the first thing you got to try and do. Because you will incriminate yourself every time. So try not to say anything. I know people that have been arrested, strapped in, thrown in the back of a car, hauled to the jail, gone through interrogation, and they let them out because they didn't even say their name. They just zipped their lip, didn't say a word. And then they go home. I know quite a few people that that's happened to. You know somebody that happened to. See? So that's the first thing. Second, if you do have to say something and deal with them, be nice. Every one of those agencies, there's good people in, even our police departments. There's a lot of guys that started when they were this young saying, Daddy, I'm going to grow up to be a police officer so I can help people. And they don't realize that when they get in there and they get on the job, that they're nothing more than a policy enforcement revenue collection agent, because that's what they are. Police means policy. Doesn't say law officer, doesn't say peace officer. In fact, the Supreme Court has ruled several times now that they're not there to protect the public. Not only that, they're all private for-profit entities. You guys ever run a Dun & Bradstreet number or a Manta.com report on your city of Fayetteville or on the county of whatever this is, or on the police department or on the courthouse? I proved in the First District Court of Cache County, Utah, that 7 county courts in Utah were owned by one man whose headquarters offices was in Ogden, and he owned them just like a McDonald's franchise. You think they're government? On June the 20th, I was meeting Melania Trump in the Rose Garden. I'm on one of her task forces. And we talked for about 20 minutes, and it was real nice, and talked about a lot of different things. She gave me a little letter thanking me for the evidence that I've turned into the Pentagon has resulted in the arrest of more than 3,000 child and sex traffickers this year since March. Okay. But President Trump came by, and I'll wear my hat tomorrow that he gave me. President Trump came by and said some nice things and gave me a hat. And I'm thinking to myself, what can I tell this man? Because I'm not going to get much time with him. You know, you're only going to get a little bit. What can I tell this man that's going to make some kind of a difference? And the only thought that came to my head was this. I said, President Trump, our 2018 census said there's 327.2 million people in the United States today. And the corporate charter that set up this corporate government, the Constitution, says there's supposed to be one representative in Congress for every 30,000 people. I said, that means we need 10,907 congressmen. And we have 435. And Congress operates off the Masons Meeting Manual as their book on how to conduct their meetings. 435 out of 10,907 is not a quorum. I said, they're dead. Their sin die. I said, no law that they pass, no executive order, no nothing that Congress does or the Senate does or any law that's written or approved means anything because there's no quorum. There's no lawful government. Everything is de facto, which means without fact. It's all de facto. They operate through the consent of the governed. And he looks at me and he says, you know, I know that, and you're right. And he says, that's why I signed executive order, and I can never remember the numbers, blah, blah, blah. Restoring the Republic of the United States of America, and now it's up to you. And I just about burst into tears. I said, geez, he knows our government has no authority to even exist except through the consent of the governed by the unknowing and uneducated, and believe me, I'm not blaming anybody, it's not your fault. We were all educated through the same system. And we're all just compartmentalized legal idiots, and we're stupid. And that includes me. The smarter I think I am, the dumber I know I am. Okay? And I'm the first to admit that. But yeah, a lot of them. A lot of them. Evidence I turned in is the reason Epstein went to jail.
Do you think he's dead, or he said he's going to testify?
He is absolutely dead.
So we lost our most important witness?
No, we have all of his evidence. He doesn't matter.
He doesn't matter?
We would have killed him anyway. You have no idea how many people that we go in their house in the middle of the night and we pick them up and we take them to the nearest military base and we put them on C-136s and they fly directly to Guantanamo Bay. And they're tried under the UCMJ, which is much tougher than the Department of Justice. There's 4 of us on this task force that collect this evidence in the United States. And we've arrested over 3,000 people since March. In that same period of time, the Department of Justice, which has 400,000 people, 100,000 to 1, has arrested 1,700. Okay? difference is the authority in which they arrest. If the Department of Justice arrests them, they have to go through a court system, a trial, and they pick a judge who's probably a pedophile. And they pick a prosecutor who's probably a pedophile. And those black robes, there's a reason they're not white robes, okay? It's good versus evil. There's a real reason they're not white. Our biggest criminals sit on the bench. And even bigger ones are prosecutors, okay? Once they've reached that position of power, no, I shouldn't say that because there's a lot of good ones still. I've won judges over to our side, okay? But the majority of them, there's a reason they're there and there's a reason they're wearing black robes. Understand they are in a for-profit system. What is a court? What is a court? Anybody looked at Black's Law Dictionary, maybe 4th, 5th edition, under the word court? It says see bank, see post office. All courts were set up as United States District Postal Courts. Benjamin Franklin set up the post office as a bank. Its currency was its stamps and its money orders that were backed by gold and silver. The post offices were banks. These were all post roads. Every road in the United States was a post road. Still is, believe it or not. They're post roads. Postal system was banks. This country was founded on banking. Banks. Still banks. Still founded on banks. Every act of Congress between 1908 and 1933 was put into place by bankers to enslave you. Every act of Congress. Look no farther than Edward Mandell House, a rich Texas oil billionaire who had never served one day as an employee of government, but had the ear of presidents and bankers. He was a billionaire, and he had the ear of presidents and bankers. How many people know about Jekyll Island? Most people in this room probably, because you've been studying it, right? Jekyll Island. Edward Mandell House got the bankers together, and they all met on Jekyll Island. And they come up with a way to enslave you all. And he had the ear of President Wilson. And they set up the IMF and the World Bank and the Federal Reserve and the Council on Foreign Relations and many, many banks and bank organizations, and they set it all up for a system of slavery. They set up our United States Treasury. The Secretary of the Treasury does not get paid from the United States government. What's that?
Goldman Sachs.
The International Monetary Fund is where his check comes from. Okay? The International Monetary Fund. That's where his paycheck comes from. One cannot serve two masters. Same with your county sheriff. Where's his check come from? I don't care if we, the people, elected him. Don't think he's ours, because you're not writing him a paycheck every month. His check comes from the county of a private for-profit corporation. He enforces policy. Okay? There are no constitutional sheriffs in this country, even the few that think they are. And I've had this conversation with a lot of them. Okay? When it comes right down to it, they must enforce policy. You know who came to the Deschutes County Sheriff's, where we were all sitting here, 114 sheriffs in that county? I was one of them. My wife was one of them. We joined because I wanted to help save people. I wanted on the search and rescue team. We have a lot. We have mountains in Oregon. I don't know if you've ever been there. They're not like these little molehills around here. You know, off my deck, I can see like 11 snow-capped peaks that go up 12,000 feet. Okay. So people get lost. In fact, last week or two, they just found a hiker up on Mount Jeff that disappeared 3 years ago. But the snow melted enough this August that he appeared, right? 3 years he'd been up there under that snow. Most summers it doesn't melt off, okay? Mount Bachelor gets like 100, Mount Bachelor's 40 minutes from my house. I can jump in the car and be up there in 40 minutes. I can be down here swimming in a swimming pool in 80-degree heat. I can go skiing in 40 minutes. 40 minutes. All right. So anyway, that really threw me off. What's that? Sheriffs. Okay, let's hold court for a minute. Who wants to be a judge? I'll pick one then. All right? Doesn't matter. All you can be judges. See, here's the thing. You can stand up there as an ex-friend or lawful counsel with a friend of yours. You don't have to be a bar attorney. No bar attorney is licensed by the state. They're licensed by the bar. It's a labor union. They're trying to form a labor union monopoly. In fact, President Trump signed an executive order asking we the people for help. A couple of us took him seriously. Chris Howlett, anybody know Chris? Guy from Florida, Chris Howlett, he was an attorney, but a good one that we've won over to our side, right? And he quit being an attorney. He set up a company called eClause, LLC. That's his law firm. But no bar members work for his law firm. He helps people without being a member of the bar. And he took President Trump seriously. And he wrote a brief. And he sent it to President Trump. President Trump calls him up and says, hey, read your brief. How would you like to come speak in front of Congress? And Chris said, yeah, okay. Turn somebody like that down, right? And Chris went in front of Congress and he stood up there and he says, the Bar Association is a monopoly. We do not allow monopolies in the United States of America. I would like you to collapse the monopoly. But I know most of you are bar members, and since you're not going to, and he looked them right in the eye and told them that. He knew they weren't going to. He says, you need to open the practice up to everybody. And my company, eClause LLC, should have the authority to stand up in court in any courtroom in the United States that I register my company as a business in that state to practice law just like a bar attorney. And guess what? They signed off on it. And Kirk Pendergrass and Chris Howlett and John Gentry out of Tennessee and a few people that I know besides them all work for Chris Howlett, and they go to courts as non-bar association attorneys. And so when Kirk Pendergrass and I walked in with executive orders and slapped them on the judge's podium and said, we're going to be helping Tim Holmseth, he just went, he couldn't think of anything to say. So we talked for an hour and 20 minutes. Okay? Yeah. Yeah, it was. And it was a sight to behold. And the people in the audience, we got them all to do affidavits afterwards, testifying to what they heard. And we got their court transcripts, because we called them out for capital felony treason 3 times, and it went unrebutted. Do you understand what that means? Nobody objected from their side. They agreed. So the judge recused himself and dismissed the case. Now they're still after Tim, but it doesn't matter. They conceded, right? Now we can tell everybody because it's public record. They conceded. If they concede once, they're going to concede again. Now let me tell you something. I went up to Washington State and I was teaching a group, about 3 times this size. And there was a couple of judges, a couple of attorneys, and a couple of legislators in the room. And you know what? In Washington State, they put a bill in front of the legislature to declare the Bar Association a monopoly and open the practice of law to everybody. Hasn't passed yet. They've tabled it. But it went there. And it was talked about and discussed, and it's been talked about and discussed 2 or 3 sessions. That's important. Okay? Well, a couple of years ago, I went to Alabama, and the 10th Amendment Society, group of people just like you, calling themselves the 10th Amendment Society, got me down there, and I gave a talk just like I'm giving today, pretty much. And they started learning from me, and I've been sending them emails and all kinds of stuff. State of Alabama is passing laws right now. Alabama is leading the pack. They're going to be the most conservative constitutional state in the country pretty soon. One of the things I talk about is our marriage licenses and the story of a mother. Very important story everybody should know. And I talked about marriage licenses and what that means and what that is. The U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, and if I can assign somebody pretty soon to erase this board so I can start over. U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, the states patented a marriage. Did you know that? They patented how they can screw you, mess with you through a marriage. And if you look at the blueprint that goes along with the patent, because when you're patenting a process, you have to put a blueprint with it. The blueprint looks something like this. Hope people can see this back there. The state is the primary contract holder in the marriage the minute you apply for the license. They join with the husband, which is animal husbandry. Never call your spouse your husband, and never call her your wife. You're a mate and a helpmate, okay? A man and a woman. And they enjoin with the wife. And there's nothing that connects them. Nothing. A dashed line, they write the word God on the dashed line. Any architect and any engineer will tell you that a dashed line on a blueprint means a beam that bears no weight. They took God out of the contract. He bears no weight in the contract. And the husband does not interact with the wife except through the state. How do you like them apples? Not very edible. Pretty sour and bitter. Okay? That's the blueprint of a marriage. Everybody he's telling me we need to break for bathrooms, anything. Anybody want to break?
Yeah, can we give David a hand for his presentation so far? You want him to come back and talk some more? All right, listen, real quickly, we got farmer's table, coffee downstairs, and refreshments, and cookies, and little muffins, and you can go on down the stairs right back here and head downstairs and use bathrooms and take a little break, and we'll meet back up here in 15 minutes, and David will speak to us, I think, until 2 in the morning. Is that what you said, David?
Whatever.
So make your way downstairs, mingle, talk to each other. 15 minutes, we'll come back and be on the schedule.
I'm so glad you brought up. I'll give you a little story anecdote. I married my wife, a woman, in Thailand. Okay, I didn't bring her back on a fiance visa. I figured it'd be simple. It wasn't. We wrote a marriage contract, witnessed by her family members, autographed by her and I, notarized down to the United States Embassy, had it recorded and notarized there.